Good morning everyone, my name is Sarah May Giral and I will be discussing the lesson 1 of Unit 3 entitled as Informative Communication versus Other Forms of Communication. On this discussion, we will dwell on the three forms of discourse that we always use on everyday life. But before we proceed to our main topic, we will first have a brief recap about the forms and types of communication. In forms of communication, we have the intrapersonal communication, then the interpersonal group, public, and mass communication. Another types of communication, we have verbal, non-verbal, written, and visual communication. Now, let's proceed to the three forms of discourse. First, we will have the narrative discourse. Narrative discourse is an act of narration, written or oral, of an event or series, real or imaginary. For example, this story of David Vega when he had experienced being infected with coronavirus during the COVID-19 pandemic. What have we noticed on his story? He narrated what happened one after another in a chronological order, which is one of the characteristics of narration. Next is descriptive discourse, which enables audience to visualize the item or subject by relying on the five senses. Descriptive discourse usually takes two forms. The static description that paints a verbal picture with words that appeal to the senses, whereas the process description that explains the various levels of advancements involved in completing a task. For instance, we can see here how Hedy Marks had described the symptoms of stress. The third form of discourse is the exposition discourse. An expository discourse consists in giving definitive explanation and clarification. It is also a summary or introduction to subject to quickly introduce what will be discussed. An example for exposition is, imagine if your grandchild were asking what is COVID-19 pandemic and you answered by telling them an exposition by saying COVID-19 pandemic started from the quick spread of coronavirus that affected everyone's lives and jobs. And we can use different methods in making exposition. It can be through definition, example, comparison, analysis, project description, and cause and effect. And we will start familiarizing from the definition. So what is definition? The definition of the word means to limit or to set bounds. For example, a term can only be explained using a dictionary word and a sentence or group of sentences. Another example of the definition is given on our module in purposive communication. Another method of exposition is examples. Examples in exposition are used to clarify complex information and ideas, and something that represents the group. For example, when you think of any person who have the aspects of wellness, who comes in your mind? It could be Jennifer Lopez, Dwayne Johnson, or Zayn Malik. They are the examples of wellness since they represent a group of being well, being healthy. Next method is comparison. Comparison is an act of finding out the differences and similarities between two or more things. Think of your favorite Filipino dish, pork sinigang, and the healthy person you admire, Jennifer Lopez and Dwayne Johnson. What is the similarities and differences? Dwayne Johnson and Jennifer Lopez is different from the pork sinigang since they are not meant to be eaten, which is the opposite of the Filipino dish. What is the similarity? The two persons and pork sinigang are both healthy. Method is analysis. Analysis is the process of compiling and reviewing information with the objective of forming a conclusion, explaining why vomiting happened, or recommending a course of action. Example, analyzing if the person you admire have any of the aspects of wellness, which are emotional, intellectual, physical, social, and spiritual aspect. Next is the process description. Process description is a set of information that describes the characteristics of a process in terms that enable effective installation, commissioning, operation, control, and maintenance. Example, the person you admire doing his workout routine and diets to be fit and well. Last but not the least, the cause and effect, which means that things happen because something enabled them to happen. The cause is why something happened, and the effect is what happened. For instance, the person you admire has achieved a lot in life and now is happy. What did they do to achieve it? They made effort and invested their time to achieve who they want to be. So that's all for the exposition. Now let's differentiate the three forms of discourse. All forms have differences from one another because descriptive discourse is used to describe, narrative is used to tell a story in a form of narrating, and exposition is used to explain something. That's all for my topic. Thank you, and let's have someone who will explain another lesson. Bye.
Good afternoon, everyone. Now, let's proceed to the topic obtaining information from various sources. Now, we have here the objectives where at the end of the topic, we are just going to differentiate the primary and the secondary sources of information and evaluate and selecting the appropriate information and analyze the multimodal text. There are types of information sources where there is a primary and secondary sources. When we say primary sources, it means that it is a first-hand documents that provide direct evidences on the topic under research investigation. Example of primary sources are the diaries, interviews, government documents, manuscript, and autobiographies. While the secondary sources, it also means to interpret and evaluate the primary sources, where we should remember that secondary sources are not evidences, but rather it is a commentary and discussion of evidence. Example of secondary sources are bibliographies, essays and reviews, journal articles, histories, and newspapers. Now that we are done to differentiate the information sources, let's proceed to selecting and evaluating the appropriate information. There are 5 criteria for evaluating appropriate sources. First is the accuracy. It is the reliability, truthfulness, or correctness of the content. It is the information supported by evidence or how reliable or truthfulness of the content is. And then second is the authority. It is the source of information like who is the author, who is the publisher, are they qualified to write on the topic? Next is the objectivity, the importance of the information you need. We have also here the currency. It is the timeless of the information, like when the information published, revised, or posted, does the source content current information, and then lastly is the purpose or coverage, which the reason of information exists, like what is the purpose of information or why does it exist. Now, in multimodal text, it creates meaning by combining two or more modes of communications such as pen, spoken word, audio, or images. It is also conveyed the reader through varying combinations of visual written, language, and spatial modes. It is simply projects that have multiple modes of communication to communicate a message. Example of multimodal text are comics, brochure, storyboards, ebooks, and social medias. There are types of multimodal text. First is the paper-based multimodal text, wherein includes the picture books, text books, graphics, novels, comments, and posters. In short, it is all about paper. Second, Second is the live multimodal text, which it conveyed through combination of various moods such as gestural, spatial, audio, and oral language. The example of it is the dance performance and oral storytelling. And the last one is the digital multimodal text, which convey a meaning through combinations of written and spoken language. There are five modes of multimodal text are the linguistics, visual, gestural, spatial, and oral. When we say mode, it is a way or manner in which something occurs or it is experienced, expressed, or done. So when we say linguistic mode, it refers to the written or spoken words, the word's choice, vocabulary, and its grammar. Second is the visual mode, where it helps the writers communicate the meaning in a way that can be seen by the audience. It includes here the images, video, colors, visual layout, symbols, and many more. Example of it is you want to show how climate change has devastated the Arctic ecosystem, but you need to include a video first that shows a real world footage like the ones we watch in National Geographic, where they include the words visual and audio for a stronger effect. The third one is the oral mode. It includes here the sound, music, pitch, tone, and voice where it catches people's attention. And the writers use the oral mode is to bring their works to life. Example of it are audiobook and spoken poetry where it can add emotion to a specific story or to an specific topic. Fourth is the gestural mode, which includes here the movement expressions, body language, facial expressions, and it allows the writer to communicate meaning through movement. Example of gestural mode is the sign languages. And lastly is the spatial mode, which includes here the spacing, position, organization, and distance of elements in text. Writers use spatial mode in the physical layout and organization of a text.
Persuasion and its rhetorical appeal. Here are the lesson's objective. At the end of the lesson, students should be able to describe the three types of rhetorical appeal. Examine a text with rhetorical appeals. Determine the rhetorical appeals that apply to the diverse target audience. Create a poster applying to the appropriate rhetorical appeals. What is rhetoric? Rhetoric, the art of speaking or writing effectively and or persuasively. In order to be more effective writer, you must understand how to use rhetoric and rhetorical devices to your advantage. Rhetorical appeals. Rhetorical appeals are the qualities of an argument that make it truly persuasive. To make a convincing argument, a writer appeals to our reader in several ways. The three different types of persuasive appeals are logos, ethos, and pathos. Persuasive appeal. Logos. The appeal to logic is used to convince an audience of the reasons. Logos would contain a clear message and cites facts and statistics, authorities, and literal analogies. Example: of all the students in the past last decade, none recommend that is an effective treatment for losing weight. Pathos. Persuading by appealing to the reader's emotion. Emotional appeal are one of the most powerful tools of persuasive. Specific word and or image choice, personal stories. The emotional appeal is used to invoke sympathy with meaningful language, a moving tone, or touching stories. Pathos example. Some people feel they have wasted their lives, but it is never too late to renew a sense of purpose and meaning and make a valuable contribution to the world that only they can make. Ethos. The source credibility, the speaker's author's authority, an appeal to character, ethical appeal. One of the central problems of argumentation is to project an impression to the readers that you are someone who's listening to. In other words, making yourselves as author into authority on the subject of the paper as well as someone who is like.
A pleasant morning to everyone. I am Christine Bisinga and I'll be discussing the Logic and Reasoning Unit 3, Lesson 4. So here are the learning compass or the learning objective. At the end of the lesson, students should be able to differentiate inductive reasoning from deductive reasoning, determine the appropriate thoughts process to use towards effective persuasion and argumentation, and avoid the use of fallacies in one's writing and everyday experiences during interaction with the other people. Logic reasoning is a thought process of drawing a conclusion from a fact or set of facts, which implies that it is a process of speaking the truth or spitting out the facts regardless of whether others agree or disagree. The difference between inductive reasoning from deductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is a method of drawing a conclusion by going from the specific to the general. It is usually constructed with deductive reasoning. So, inductive reasoning has the opposite method or process that are different from deductive. So, there's a process in order to draw a conclusion. So, you need to have a specific observation, so one must observe using one of the four senses of human, which is the sight. Example, Baby Jack said his first word at the age of 12. All babies observe say their first word at the age of 12 months. So, in general conclusion, all babies say their first word at the age of 12 months. So, that is inductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is a logical where you progress from general ideas to a specific conclusion. So the process is from general ideas to a specific conclusion, and it clearly differs to the process of the inductive reasoning. Example, all insects have exactly 6 legs. Spiders have 8 legs. Therefore, in conclusion, spiders are not insects. So that is deductive reasoning. Okay, before we proceed, let us watch first the evolution of pageants and beauty pageants. Okay, after watching the video, please answer the following. Okay, let's proceed to the policies. So what is policy? Policy is an error in reasoning. So in order to have an effective interaction with other people, you must avoid not to commit these fallacies while communicating with other people. There are policies that should be avoided during reasoning. Argumentation against the person. Instead of finding fault on a claim, proposal, or argument, the arguer directs his attack on the character, personality, or belief. So most people commit this kind of fallacy, especially when they are triggered. So instead of arguing of the claim, they attack the character and the personality. Argumentation that goes on a circle. The arguer evades the real conclusion by restating the same conclusion in new words, making the reasoning circular. So a person attempts to prove something singular logic. They use the conclusion as evidence to prove that conclusions are very true. So example, using logic is important because it's important to use logic. So the message of the claim is just circling. Non sequitur, or it does not follow. The arguer draws a conclusion not supported by the premises or fails to include assumptions to connect between ideas. Example, someone asks you what it's like outside and you reply it's 2 p.m. You've just used a non sequitur, a statement that does not follow what was being discussed. Instead explaining what the outside looks like, you've just said the time. Argumentation that uses flattery or praise. Instead of presenting evidence or good reasons, we use to get what we want to seek approval. It is a fallacy that uses flattery to the listener so that the listener is more likely to support the argument or claim. Example, we do this normally at home, praising your mom for a wonderful dinner just before asking if you can get out of the washing the dishes tonight. Argumentation that appeal to force a threat. One uses force or threat instead of reasons. The threat may be physical or psychological. So in this argumentation, it has forcing in order to claim the argumentation of others. Example, you have a friend who wants to win in a competition and desperately want to be the top runner in school. So he says something that if you win the race, you will be beaten to death. So it has a threat and it's not good. Hasty generalization. The arguer makes a claim about the whole population. It's an argument that moves from the particular to the general. Instead of blaming one person, you generalize the whole population. Example, instead blaming your father for being a cheater, you just said that all men are useless. So that is hasty generalization. Instead of blaming one person, you blame all the population. Argument from ignorance. The arguer cannot prove the argument, therefore it is true. An argument from ignorance is the argument that something must be true because it hasn't been proved false and vice versa. Example, Andrew can't prove he didn't eat the last jelly bean, therefore he ate it. So admit it or not, we experience these kinds of argument in real life situation. Bandwagon argument. It justified, might is right, and many people cannot be wrong. Bandwagon argues that one must accept or reject an argument because of everyone else who accepts it or rejects it, similar to peer pressure. So example, Katie likes to read and would rather do that than play sports. Her friends make fun of her and tell her that reading is for nerds. Katie stops reading so much and starts to play sports more time. So this happened in real life, and in order to not to get out of the place, we used to copy what they do in life. Appeal to pity. Instead of presenting relevant and strong evidence or reasons to support the claim, we resort to evoking pity or sympathy. So someone tries to win support for an argument or the idea by exploiting one's opponent's feelings of pity or guilt. Example, you have a conversation with your teacher. She is scolding you for having a bad grades. So instead of saying your reasons that you have done everything just to pass, you just cried and asking another chance because you will die if you fail. So it's appeal to pity. Appeal to unqualified. This policy is committed when we cite opinion or judgment of someone who commands respect and reverence but who is not recognized authority. For example, an actor who promotes a medical product despite having no medical training can be considered a false authority because they lack relevant credential or expertise with regard to the product that they are promoting. Fallacy of division. We argue that what is true of a whole or class is true to every member. For example, healthy brains think healthy brains are comprised of nothing but brain cells. If healthy brains think, then the individual brain cells can think too. Hearing. Instead of addressing the matter under consideration, the arguer introduces an unrelated topic to draw the argument away from the issue. Example, inviting your friend to a mukbang and you said that having coffee would be better too. So you're getting away with the topic. So, what is new is good. The arguer makes a case in the belief that what is new is good. Example, recommending a newly beauty product because it's effective without any evidence that it's really effective.
When we say ethical persuasion, it means is to influence the audience belief or behavior, a process of persuading someone to believe something by following ethical means like honesty, integrity, and well-being without impartiality. There are following terms that can be used to talk about persuasion. There is awareness, where accepting information for the first time, and then attitude, the predisposition to like or dislike things. Belief means that assessment that things are true or false. And then last is the behavior, which means observable action. We have also here the principles of persuasion. We have reciprocity, where perceived high authority status of a person making a request can make people more compliant with that request. Example is a salesperson giving freebie to potential customers, hoping that it will lead them to return the favor by purchasing something. Second is liking, which tend to attach people who communicate to us that they like us, who make us feel good about ourselves. The third one is the scarcity, means the perception of inadequate supply or unlimited sources. For example, the person who claims that an opportunity is scarce when it is not. The consequences is that only one person wins in that situation, and that's the smuggler. That is, smuggler only wins for a short time. However, because after being fooled, no one wants to do business with the smuggler again. We also have consistency, tend to stick with whatever already chosen and committed. We also have social proof or consensus, that tends to trust more in things that are popular or endorsed by people that we trust. And lastly, the authority tend to follow people who look like they know what they are doing.
Persuasive techniques are the methods or strategies that writers use to take a stance on an issue, convincing their readers to agree with a certain idea or opinion. Writers vary their persuasive techniques based upon their audience, motives, and writing genre. The picture shows how an author persuades his audience, or our readers. 6. Persuasive techniques. Here are some commonly used writing techniques for you to try. 1. Understand what your readers want. 2. Build credibility with your readers. Use the right tone. Flatter your audience. Pay attention to your language. And last, use rhetorical question and repetition.
Argument building, the ability of individual to present an idea or make claim statement and then support it with evidence. So there are structure argument building, assertion, reasons, evidence. Assertion, a claim or statement that needs to be proven or explained. Basically, it's the idea that you want to try to make when creating an argument to support or oppose the resolution. Okay, example. The resolution, attending academics is good for children. Assertion, children enjoy learning at academics. So, it's a good assertion because it supports the resolution. It is a statement that can be supported with reasoning and there can be evidence found to also support this argument. So, let's move to the next part, the reasoning. Reasoning, the act of proving an assertion by explaining, describing, and elaborating. Basically, you're just trying to show that the argument you make has a logic in it. The reason why should be explained simply and clearly. So let's go back to the resolution of assertion. Attending academies is good for children. Now, if you remember, the assertion is the children enjoy learning at academies. Now, we need to make a reason for this. We need to answer, but why? Why do children learning in academies? So, we have a reason. Reason. Academies have a positive effect on their education. This reasoning supports for the assertion and explains why children enjoyed going to academies. For the final parts of argument is to have a good evidence. Evidence is a fact, information, or observation presented in support of an assertion. So let's go back to the resolution. Attending academies is good for children. Evidence, a study from Seoul National University in 2007 said that 69% of children were satisfied with their private school classes. Additionally, 73.9% of children also thought that academies had a positive effect on their public school grades and abilities. So, when getting a evidence, you need to acknowledge the author and the year when it published. So, let's put this together. Pro-argument number 1, assertion. Children enjoy learning at academies. Reasoning, academies have a positive effect on their education. Evidence, a study from Seoul National University in 2007 said that 69% of children were satisfied with their private school classes. Additionally, 73.9% of children also thought that academies had a positive effect on their public school grades and abilities. So, let's move to impact. At the end of the argument, you should explain why that argument is important in debate. You should choose a strong argument in order to have an impact. Impact. My argument is that going to academies help one students to improve their learning at the same time making friends. This means that academies are not only helpful for students to prepare for their future but also to have fun within school. Okay, here are some tips in how to have a good impact to the audience so that they will pay attention to your argument. First one is use eye contact to catch their attention. Second is make it simple. Use words that can understand immediately so that your audience will understand. And the last is try to make the impact important for the judge. Thank you.